Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of a stay-at-home homily that will accompany our at-home prayer on Sunday. You can find the reading, this gospel reading, and all the other readings in your emailed Sunday bulletin, which is attached to this email. And I hope you can use it along with a prayer book for St. Simon's and the Sunday order of service that's in there. We'll be doing this from week to week as we live through this time of not gathering together on Sunday. On to the man born blind. Why was that man born blind? Who sinned? For that matter, why do bad things happen at all? Who sinned? Why is there a coronavirus pandemic? Who sinned? Now, there's a question that hits a bit close to home, especially as some people of Chinese and other Asian heritages feel targeted for blame for the situation that we are in because this virus was first identified and treated in China. Who sinned? Who is to blame? How timely our story of the man blind from birth is for our current moment. He was himself the occasion of that kind of blame. You were born entirely in sins, declare his opponents, as they dismiss the story of his healing. And perhaps we cannot blame them. It seems entirely natural to look for a reason, even a moral one like a sin, to explain why things are not as we would wish them to be. Can you remember a time in your life when something bad happened and you wondered what you had done to deserve it? Enter this week's hero, the man blind from birth. He was the very picture of what Jesus says about him. He was born blind so that God's work might be revealed in him. Like our hero last week, the woman of Samaria, this man simply refuses to accept any of the easy religious answers those around him gave for his condition. Nor does he try to give any justification for his healing, as if he deserved it or merited it somehow. Time and again, this man simply tells his own story. I was blind. This man spread mud on my eye and told me to wash, and now I see. Period. And he never wavers, not even when his own parents distance themselves. They too had been shamed, after all, as sinners, because their son had been born impaired. An experience still shared, no doubt, by some parents of children with impairments today. Our hero glorified God by telling the truth about himself. He had been born blind. He was touched by Jesus, and now he sees. Not a word about being a sinner or born from sin. Our hero stands in sharp contrast to his opponents, who simply refuse to acknowledge the evidence. They simply will not believe the man's story. What he says undercuts the way they have organized the world. If you are good, you will prosper and enjoy good health. If you sin, you will suffer. If you are suffering, you must have sinned. Period. And they simply will not accept any evidence to the contrary, and so they fail to see God at work right before their eyes. Have we ever noticed reasoning like that in ourselves? And if we have, we could be forgiven, because it's certainly a part of our own religious heritage as well. Jesus' message, though, is something different entirely. Impairment is no obstacle to God's glory. On the contrary, as difficult as it can be, our bodies in their limits reflect God's glory in their own unique ways. So then, where do we see God at work in this pandemic, in this time of suffering, of impairment, of illness? What questions are we asking through it? I do hope that we are cautious about any questions of blame. Wherever a virus is first diagnosed, its spread is among the hazards of being alive, even if we have learned how to mitigate it. This virus is not a Chinese virus any more than HIV was ever a gay virus. Both are organisms that seek to propagate themselves, as all living things do. Blame can only lead to scapegoating, and all of its bitter fruits. For my own part, a better question is rooted in Jesus' words. How might God's glory appear in a new and unique way in this time of common sickness and danger? While I do not believe for a second that God now or ever causes or sends suffering, I do believe that no crisis or suffering can ever prevent God's grace and glory from shining through. And we are invited to be a part of that divine work. In sickness and health, impairment and ability, crisis and calm, God is ever present, ready to draw us more closely to God and to one another. So, what will it take for us to see as today's gospel hero came to see? What prevents us from recognizing God's movement in an anxious time? How might we allow Jesus to touch our senses, to allow the waters of baptism to wash us in new ways? Will you seek and serve Christ in all people, loving your neighbor as yourself? That question from our baptismal covenant would have ended our Sunday liturgy this week. Let us nevertheless ask it of ourselves. How can we love our neighbor and ourselves in this period of confinement? Our bishop has asked us to stay at home as a religious practice, which certainly invites us to imagine new ways to love neighbor and self. Even more, this time of confinement invites us to see with the new eyes of today's gospel hero, to acknowledge the unhelpful answers we have relied upon at times to explain why bad things happen, to explore new ways to discern God's presence and follow where it leads, to allow God to be glorified in us, in our own limitations, whatever they are. What might Jesus be inviting us to see anew as we journey together still, always at least 6 feet apart? There are surely new things being revealed for those ready to see them.